On the 15th of March, 2026, a Pakistani-owned tanker named the Karachi passed safely through the Strait of Hormuz. What made this voyage historic was how the cargo was paid for. The oil aboard that ship was traded entirely in Chinese yuan. That transaction followed a rapid regional escalation. After the United States and Israel launched a sudden strike that wiped out Iran's supreme leader, retaliatory attacks immediately began spreading across the Middle East. The 6 nations of the Gulf states quickly found themselves caught in the crossfire. After relying on an airtight security agreement with America for 50 years, these leaders were suddenly watching the primary benefit of that bargain, their physical safety, disappear. If these states stop propping up American interests, the consequences won't be found on a battlefield. Rather, the potential withdrawal of their support points toward a gradual erosion of the dollar's status, leaving Washington without its most effective tool for projecting influence. To understand how a handful of desert nations acquired that kind of leverage, you have to look at what they've built over the last century. Following the discovery of oil in the 1930s, these countries underwent massive centralized development, turning nomadic outposts like Dubai into sprawling metropolises in a generation. Because the state controlled the oil wealth, it created a highly specific social contract. The ruling monarchs distributed high wages, free infrastructure, and heavy subsidies to their citizens. In exchange, the public provided political obedience. That domestic balance relies on 2 external factors remaining constant. The oil money must keep flowing, and the surrounding region must stay stable. Over the last few decades, these states have poured hundreds of billions of dollars into diversifying their economies, building sovereign wealth funds and global hubs for tourism. But those efforts are worthless if international investors and tourists no longer perceive the Gulf as a safe, predictable environment. We have seen what happens when that stability is threatened. In 1973, responding to Western support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War, a coalition of Middle Eastern oil producers abruptly shut off the flow of crude to the United States. The embargo choked the American economy. Global energy prices shot from $3 to $10 a barrel in a matter of months, sparking massive shortages and kicking off nearly a decade of high inflation across the West. Recognizing the vulnerability of the domestic economy, Richard Nixon's administration quietly began negotiating a survival pact with Saudi Arabia, the world's most critical oil producer. By 1975, they finalized an arrangement built on a specific exchange. America provides absolute military protection, and in return, Saudi Arabia ensures all its oil is priced and settled exclusively in US dollars. This flowchart illustrates how that system works in practice. If South Korea wants to buy crude from the United Arab Emirates, they cannot simply trade their own currency. They must first sell their money to buy US dollars, and then use those dollars to complete the purchase from the UAE. Multiplied across every country on Earth needing energy, this creates an enormous, continuous demand for American currency. The dollar effectively acts as the required middleman for a multi-trillion-dollar global energy market. Because the world is forced to hold on to dollars to buy oil, the United States government can print practically limitless amounts of currency. This international demand absorbs the new money, allowing Washington to rack up $26 trillion in foreign debt without triggering hyperinflation at home. By taking in $900 billion more in goods than it exports every year, the U.S. essentially finances its lifestyle using the global demand for its currency. When divided across the population, that imbalance equates to a $3,000 annual benefit for every American, a subsidy made possible only because the world needs those dollars to buy fuel. Bringing us back to the crisis of 2026, the United States violated the core premise of that 1975 agreement. By initiating strikes and turning the region into an active war zone, Washington directly threatened the security it promised to provide. The financial devastation hit immediately. Retaliatory missile strikes forced the world's largest oil and gas refineries to shut down operations, bleeding the Gulf economies of $1 billion every single day. Out on the water, the chaos effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz. A fifth of the world's daily oil supply was suddenly bottlenecked, leaving hundreds of massive transport ships stranded as targets for further attacks. These rulers cannot call an election to absorb public anger. Their domestic survival is dependent on keeping the streets safe and the money flowing. When trade halts and missiles fall, their physical grip on power is at risk. As this chart demonstrates, these nations are far from powerless. Together, these 6 countries control nearly a third of total global oil output and well over half of the world's proven reserves. They possess the ability to shift the global inflation rate by choice. By simply cutting production or moving oil sales away from the dollar, they can force energy prices to rise on a global scale. Domestic markets dictate American politics. A massive spike in inflation and energy prices right before an election is a political nightmare for the sitting administration. America's pursuit of military dominance created a surprising vulnerability. The stability of its domestic economy now rests in the hands of a small group of foreign allies who are increasingly willing to look for other partners.
Right now, some of America's closest Gulf Arab allies are quietly reviewing their investments in the States. We're talking about trillions of dollars in previously pledged funds that are suddenly under severe scrutiny, and the frustration behind closed doors is starting to spill out. Recently, a prominent Dubai billionaire went online to ask why the Gulf should bear the fallout from regional escalations nobody actually asked for. He quickly deleted the post, but the sentiment remains. For decades, the only reason these nations stuck to the Petro-Dollar deal was a very specific exchange. They agreed to price their oil entirely in US dollars, and in return, the United States promised them absolute military protection. But lately, the US hasn't been holding up its end of that bargain. Just days before the recent conflict with Iran began, Gulf states flew diplomats to Washington in a desperate attempt to stop the escalation. Their warnings were completely ignored. And once the bombing started, it became clear that Qatar's stockpile of Patriot interceptor missiles could run out in as little as 4 days. Yet America refused to help restock them. This echoes what happened back in 2019, when Iranian drones hit Saudi Arabia's oil facilities, knocking out 5% of global supply, and Washington did nothing in response. If this were any standard treaty, these allies would have likely abandoned the deal long ago. But severing this specific tie means unraveling a global financial architecture that the entire world's energy markets are built around. The original agreement struck in the 1970s required Saudi Arabia to sell its oil exclusively in dollars, but the true power of that arrangement lay in what happened to the money next. Curious? Take a look at this diagram showing the global flow of oil money. For decades, the Gulf states took the massive stockpiles of dollars they earned from selling oil and reinvested them straight back into U.S. financial assets, specifically treasury bonds. This recycling process was kept largely secret until the numbers were finally disclosed in 2016. With this guaranteed, constant influx of foreign money buying up its debt, Washington could afford to spend far more than it earned year after year. The more foreign investors bought these bonds, the cheaper it became for the U.S. government to borrow money. After half a century of operating this way, the United States has built up nearly $39 trillion in national debt, and managing that massive obligation relies almost entirely on the continued willingness of these foreign buyers to keep purchasing U.S. debt. American domestic financial stability is mathematically tied to the ongoing loyalty of these Middle Eastern partners. But wealth in one of the most volatile regions in the world requires a reliable protector. If America is no longer willing to actively provide that security shield, the Gulf states have to find someone who will. Over the last 20 years, China has increased its share of world trade 7-fold, and they have quietly stepped in to fill that void. Today, Beijing is already Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. They bring specific strategic benefits to the table. China now operates the world's largest navy by personnel. They don't attach human rights conditions to their diplomacy, and they are completely willing to sell advanced military technology without restrictions. We are now seeing the direct results of this new relationship. Saudi Arabia and China recently signed a currency swap agreement that allows them to settle their massive trade deals directly in yuan and rial, cutting the US dollar out of the transaction entirely. The decades-old financial architecture is not going to collapse overnight. Instead, the individual pieces of the system are being methodically and quietly dismantled and replaced. We are already watching what this slow bleed looks like in real time. Gulf sovereign wealth funds, which collectively manage over $3 trillion, are quietly moving billions away from American assets and reallocating them into Asian markets. This creates an immediate mathematical problem at home. When the pool of foreign buyers for U.S. debt shrinks,
Washington is forced to offer much higher interest rates just to attract enough lenders to keep the government running. To put that into perspective, if interest rates rise by just 2 percentage points due to a lack of demand, servicing that debt would cost the United States an additional $700 billion every single year. Pushing away these historical allies leaves Washington with terrible options. The government would have to enact massive tax hikes, make brutal cuts to the federal budget, or borrow even more money just to pay the interest on the money it already owes. Because this global equilibrium is failing, superpowers are aggressively retreating inward, and they are scrambling to physically secure their own independent raw material supply chains within their own borders. At the exact same time, the massive push to build out AI data centers and upgrade electrical grids is creating a copper shortage on a scale the US hasn't seen in generations. This material deficit has triggered a major political response. Through executive orders and aggressive tariffs on imports, the current administration is trying to force copper production back onto US soil as quickly as possible. This brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Giant Mining Corp, trading under the ticker symbol BFGFF. They are positioning themselves right in the middle of this domestic resource push, developing the historical Majuba Hill copper mine in the highly rated mining jurisdiction of Nevada. With the Petro-Dollar safety net dissolving, domestic mineral independence has become a foundational requirement for national stability. As the old global agreements fade, the rebirth of American mining offers a critical path through a more fragmented world.